You know it, I know it. Russia could wipe Ukraine clean off the map and it would have no effect on the United States. What is going on, YouTube? Recently, Trump hosted Zelensky in the White House to discuss signing a mineral deal that would allow U.S. businesses to mine precious minerals in the Ukraine, with the hopes that we would be able to recoup some of our losses in the billions of dollars that we sent to Ukraine. Zelensky was hoping for direct security from the United States in exchange for this mineral deal, while Trump was hoping that the implied threat of the United States presence there would be enough to fend off Russia. But for Zelensky, that's not good enough. And that caused a spat between the White House and Zelensky, and they had a pretty heated argument. Kind of the type of thing you'd see at your Thanksgiving dinner between your angry college kid who doesn't really know how to speak up for themselves when they're not behind a keyboard, and your loud, drunk uncle who likes to go off on rants. Zelensky has that same look on his face that the teenager has when they have nothing to say at the dinner table but are ready to fire off a bunch of tweets to their private Twitter account or Instagram stories. The meeting ended with no deal being signed. Trump telling Zelensky to abandon any idea of them possibly joining NATO. And the future of U.S. support in Ukraine hangs in the balance. J.D. Vance brought up that Biden was thumping his chest at Russia, and that sort of war first ideology doesn't really work so well, and that we need to focus on diplomacy with Russia. All very good things. I think we're heading in the right direction with that conversation, but it's also a little bit hypocritical coming from that administration. The blank checks to the Ukraine have been excessive. We don't need to foot the bill for every single war on earth. Sometimes it's okay to let two countries sort out their own grievances themselves without U.S. intervention. And I'm personally sick of the moral onus of every single war on earth being thrust upon the United States, while every effort to help Americans directly is mocked and belittled, and humanitarian aid efforts around the world face the same ridicule. But when it comes to war, they're not usually put under the same scrutiny. Suddenly there's this moral outrage, and the inhumanity of not fighting the war is always brought up and thrust upon people who just don't want war. Not that this administration has any intentions of using the savings from Ukraine to help the American people. Possibly the contrary, as they actually have another country they prefer to have their money go towards. And I'm sure you can guess which country I'm going to bring up. It's Israel, of course. Nothing new, nothing surprising. And I'm sure you watching knew where this video was heading. It was refreshing to hear Trump sit down and talk to Zelensky and say, you know, this is your war. It's really not going to affect us. We know this. The United States wants spheres of influence, but at the end of the day, you know it, I know it. Russia could wipe Ukraine clean off the map, and it would have no effect on the United States. That's just a fact. I'm not saying I want Ukraine to be wiped off the face of the earth. I'm not saying I side with Russia. I'm just saying a fact that we all know and we all secretly agree with, and maybe not everyone's willing to say it. There is not any threat, zero threat, that if Ukraine were to lose this war, it has any effect on the United States directly. Sure, there might be economic implications that might affect us at the grocery store, but that's been this entire war. When gas prices started getting comically high, it started around when the Ukraine war started. That's not a reason to continue funding this war, but the same could be said for Israel. Completely wiped off the map, and it would have no real effect on the United States. We would just lose a sphere of influence, which happens all the time. We gain them, we lose them. I don't care. I don't want the United States to have more spheres of influence. I really don't. But with Ukraine, he has a good stance on we shouldn't be footing the bill. No sphere of influence is worth that much money, and we need to focus those funds somewhere else, and we shouldn't be financing every war on earth. But he cannot hold Israel to that same standard. You would never in a million years hear Trump talk to Netanyahu the way he talked to Zelensky. Why is it that Trump can talk to Zelensky like that, but not Israel? And I'm sure you all know why already, but it's worth reiterating for those who weren't really paying attention. There is no real Ukraine pact that has the same influence as AIPAC. Israel has functionally total control of our government and all our politicians. Sure, there are some politicians here and there who aren't AIPAC funded who speak out against the politicians that have an AIPAC guy, but AIPAC really is an octopus in our United States government. You can't speak out against AIPAC or they'll ruin you. You have no career. Ukraine doesn't have that. Trump wants to show that he's America first, and he needs a scapegoat. And unfortunately, Ukraine doesn't have the influence to protect them from being that scapegoat. He gets to have Zelensky in his office, do a little humiliation ritual, act like the tough guy, tell him, we're not giving you any more money, the free ride's over, the Biden checks are done, we're not funding your war, we're doing diplomacy. And he gets to look real good to his base, who doesn't want to fund Ukraine. But with Israel, if he did the same thing, it would piss off his AIPAC handlers, and he's not allowed to do that. There is a potential argument to be made also that Trump's religious base might be upset with criticisms of Israel, but I think there's a good amount of Trump supporters that are against the amount of money he sends to Israel and would like to see that done away with as well. But Ukraine is just a simple sphere of influence that the United States only supports so far as it benefits their agenda and gives them a sufficient ROI. Israel's a lot more than a sphere of influence to the United States. It's almost like the United States is a sphere of influence for Israel. Normally, when the US has a sphere of influence, the US sets the agenda, sets the criteria, and that country bends to US will and US interests. In Israel's case, it's the other way around. Israel sets the agenda. Israel decides where the United States stands on certain geopolitical issues. Israel tells the United States to go into wars and topple regimes on their behalf. And Ukraine, from the US empire perspective, is probably better to keep Ukraine than not. But Trump needs to show off his bravado. And the Ukraine was a really good opportunity to save some money, show off to his base that he means America first, and maybe have a few more dollars left so he can throw a couple bucks Israel's way. Because with all the budget cuts, Doge, this thing and that thing being cut, Israel's never on the chopping block whenever the topic of ending war and cutting funding is brought up. So I basically just wanted to chime in to say it's cool how hard of a time Trump was able to give Zelensky, but it's kind of smoke and mirrors. Trump's real America first stance isn't maybe as strong as that spectacle made it appear. He's not really about that life. He just found a good opportunity to look like he is. And whether he actually does cut funding to Ukraine or not, we'll see if he even holds up to that. But at the end of the day, total cutting off of Ukraine, and he'll never suggest even dialing back the amount we give to Israel. And that's the problem. That's the problem with this selective America First policy. That's all for now. Stay tuned for the next video. Don't forget to rate, subscribe, comment below your thoughts, and I will see you guys around.